zero the enzyme during my PhD years, exploring the clinical relevance of the microbiome in critically ill patients. My name is Karim Dilan Márk, and I work here at the university at the Anesthesiology and Intensive Care Department, or whatever it's called now. And I'm a new father nowadays, thanks to the help of Dr. Brashko. So he's also here. My vision is that science may overcome quickery, and my mission is to understand better and disseminate better the beauty of evidence creation. And out of my ongoing projects, I had recent advancements in the first two. The biggest meta-analysis, in that we are investigating the extent of dysbiosis in the critically ill, talking about dysbiosis and the microbiome that are living on basically every surface of our body, and the interaction of our immune system, epithelial cells, and those microbial communities. If any harm is present to us, to the host, or selectively to these communities, then a change in composition and the loss of diversity is seen, and that is what we call dysbiosis. Problem during critical illness is that the severity and the specific interventions may lead to dysbiosis and to the potential overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria that leads to secondary infections related to mortality and morbidity. But we still don't know a lot of things like the extent and the exact factors related to dysbiosis. So our aim was to analyze the extent and the risk factors of dysbiosis in critically ill patients. Our hypothesis was that it's frequent and it's influenced by distinct illness-associated factors and patterns. And by increasing the awareness, we think that it may lead to appropriate testing maybe, and implementation of preventive measures. I worked with a great pool of papers in the selection, and I chose to work with the well-known diversity indices like Shannon and KO1, and I extracted a lot regarding to dysbiosis at gut, lower respiratory tract system, and the blood, and I ran several analyses on my data, which is the largest database ever created with more than 10,000 patients in it. But due to the differences in sequencing methods and mainly the differences in taxonomic assignment, comparability seemed to be greatly compromised. And I saw that results are not representing really the outcomes, but mainly methodological differences. For example, our main research question, the interaction of diversity and any illness-associated patterns, we are looking for any interactions between age, shock, SARS-CoV infection, pneumonia, survival rates, feeding patterns, fiber intake, probiotic intake, and also antibiotic therapy and the illness severity on this huge database with diversity data, but no reliable interaction was seen. And I think that, it's obviously because of the compromised data. You can imagine antibiotic therapy and illness severity has an effect on diversity. I also examined the temporal changes because a lot of articles are reported more than one sampling. Here on the y-axis you can see the Shannon diversity index. And what you can see here, and very interesting, is that virtually there was no change in the diversity during the course of illness. But which is very important here is that there is some fluctuation over time in the pooled diversity indices in one article, but between two articles, the scale is like enormously different, and it's unacceptable. And I want to highlight that all the systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and reviews which are currently done and in the Dilan journal published, they are all just pulled these data together and had a conclusion, which is unacceptable. So to improve comparability, we wanted to move forward from this raw comparison. And for that, I did a new selection from that pool, only assessing papers where both healthy control and ICU patients' diversity was measured with the same method, and made a standardized mean difference calculation. With that, there was a great reduction of eligible studies and patients, but some results I can accept came. For example, the main question was answered that the microbial diversity is significantly reduced in the critically ill, and we find no difference in the extent of diversity loss among adults and children. With other diversity indices, we got the same results. Microbial richness is significantly reduced in the critically ill. So with the standardized comparison, I got more reliable results, but I still want to do a large analysis with reliable results. So for that, I downloaded all the raw sequence data from repositories, and I plan to build an individual patient data meta-analysis independently from the original papers, which is considered the highest evidence regarding to Cochrane. Doing so, I checked some platforms that are widely used and which are easy to use. But if you run a fast calculation, our recalculations would cost $1 million. And unfortunately, TM is just getting some part of my PhD money, so I don't have that much yet. And also the free and easy to use platform are available, but they are not able to handle this much amount of data. So we have to program our own things. I cannot program yet, but there is hope that I will find someone. As a conclusion, we can say that raw comparison is not acceptable due to methodological differences, and that critical illness seems to be associated with a huge loss of microbial diversity, which is similar in adults and children, and more results will come. In this second project, I compared different sample obtaining methods for lower respiratory tract microbiome testing, because even in pre-COVID era, pneumonia was one of the leading causes of death. And to diagnose and manage pneumonia well, you need good quality samples. In order to get those, you can do a bronchoalveolar lavage, or have a less invasive, easier to perform endotracheal aspiration or induced sputum collection. Once you have the sample, you can do culture-based techniques to identify that one or two culturable virulent bacteria, or if you have money and knowledge and resource, you can do metagenomic sequences, and you will get the whole landscape of the microbiome in the sample. All non-virulent, non-pathogenic, non-culturable bacteria will be present there. And many studies compared BAL and ETA based on culturing results, but although it's growing potential, these metagenomic sequencing results have not been systematically compared between the two. So our aim was to do that. The question sounds, is there any difference between the diversity of those samples, where diversity is depicted by this richness and evenness estimators, the KO, Shannon, and beta diversity, obtained by either BAL or endotracheal sampling in patients undergoing respiratory tract sampling. And our hypothesis is that there is no difference between sampling methods, so we expect not to have a higher diversity with either method. And if that is the case, then ETA would be the method of choice when you're analyzing lower respiratory tract microbiome, because it's more convenient and less invasive. Our results came back as expected. So if you check, there is no any lateralization, and the results are not favoring either method when comparing diversity measured by the Shannon diversity index, and the same results we got with the KO1. So there is no difference between sampling methods in measured richness or diversity. So we can conclude that when assessing lower respiratory tract microbiome diversity with metagenomic sequencing, there is no need to perform a BAL. With the risk of bias analysis, I was working a lot because Cochrane Handbook states that choosing a relevant tool adapted to the study-specific design is essential, and the research question of us focused on the diversity samples obtained by different methods from the same patient at the same time. So items of traditional risk of bias assessment tools are basically irrelevant. Then the source of bias needed to be discovered. So I had to conduct a literature review to identify guidelines, protocol, and establish best practices, and to define parameters that are important for assessing biases associated with my question. And I did a checklist based on this evidence and sorted items in domains. There is this checklist which I also plan to publicate. It can be useful for future research. And the full risk of bias analysis like this is assessing the quality of sampling methods and the factors which are affecting the scale of the results. And there are 2 versions. There is a shorter version as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So are there any questions? So while the audience is thinking, let me ask a naive and provocative question. So regarding the first topic, so you mentioned that dysbiosis was investigated in the blood, gut, and the lower respiratory tract. Has anyone ever tried investigating the dysbiosis in skin?
Yeah. Skin is another domain.
These patients.
Oral flora is another domain. But with skin in the critically ill, it was not that relevant. They were checking if gram-negative organisms like Pseudomonas or Acinetobacter from the inguinal area or from this area, I don't know in English, can be a source of infection, and if everyday chlorhexidine baths helps this or not. But the biomass, which is pathogenic on the skin flora, is just so little and so few, it doesn't seem to affect the course of critical illness.
Absolutely, but could other ratios of the cutaneous microbiota be used as markers or predictors or indicators that something is going wrong?
I think it can, but because the number of biomass is so low there and so special, it's correlating much less with the course of illness than other samples, which are very easily obtainable, like feces or saliva or other parts. So they are much more convenient to use.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have only one simple question. What is your opinion? How could we put your ideas into the daily clinical practice about microbiome? How can we improve the critical patient's microbiome in the clinical settings?
There were a lot of research, good quality research about possible interventions to change the course of developing dysbiosis, but there are not too many promising results. But from the IPD meta-analysis, I hope to have a more in-depth look at what are the affecting factors. So imagine this as a retrospective registry. We will have thousands of patients with a lot of data, and individually we're gonna have the composition of their microbiome. So pattern recognition will be very useful there, and we can say that patients who are getting high fiber diet are trend to have less dysbiosis, or patients with higher PEEP or more invasive mechanical ventilation or higher oxygen fractions, the lower respiratory tract are affected. But with just pooled data, you cannot do it. You could, but it's unusable.